So, thanks a lot for coming to watch this episode as well from Strategist
Yes, yes.
Revival, that I'm very proud of it. And thanks a lot, Tosin, for participating in it. Welcome to this project that I have that I love, the podcast. Thanks a lot for being here.
It's the pleasure is mine, but I think I should also be the one, saying that, thanks for having me here, really. I can remember when you first sent a message that, oh, you've really been looking for, African voices on your podcast. I think that's actually a very beautiful thing. So thank you, Rafa, for having me.
Oh, thanks a lot. I think just thinking about that. I have people from 12 or 13 different countries that have participated on my podcast, but
Oh,
nobody from Africa and Asia. I'm looking for one from Asia as well.
oh,
But it will be amazing because we had a conversation prior to this recording and it was fantastic already. And I would love
yeah.
to learn and remember more about your career. Could you tell about your career to the audience over here?
Okay, how I started advertising, I think there's a very interesting backstory. So I studied psychology in school, right? And when you study psychology, the natural career path is for you to be a clinical psychologist, at least for most people in school and all that. And I actually thought I would actually make a very good therapist. Oh, but I think it was in my second year when I registered for a course that is called consumer psychology. And that was the course that actually showed me another side of psychology, where is the psychology that has to do with how people buy, how they make purchase decisions, and all that. So that's where the whole interest started, and it opened up a new world of how marketing, advertising, actually help to aid in helping brands to kind of like get people to buy them, and some of these things. So from there, I just had a completely new passion. After registering for that course, then I started looking for internships in advertising agency, and so I didn't start as a strategist. Even when I got a shot at an advertising agency, I started as an art director, right? And I was I was actually a pretty decent one, but I think along the line I started getting to know that there is actually some other career path that I could explore. That is because again, advertising, then the only people that you see that work in advertising are the art directors and the copywriters, right? You rarely ever hear that there are people called strategists that also work in advertising. Right. So one thing led to the other, but it also didn't sort of like I didn't immediately transition, right? It's just started me volunteering in a particular agency to try out the strategy role because they were looking forward then, I didn't know anything about it. I just walked into my boss's office. I said, I'm going to try this thing out. And from there, I started with Google, essentially, just Googling stuff. From there I started seeing that there are actually communities in my country, Nigeria. Then I started mingling with other strategists. From there I started taking a couple of short courses here and there to develop myself. But I think the major unlock actually came when I found when I read a book called The Villager. The Villager: How African Consume Brands. It's actually written by a very brilliant man called Fayolu Bodun, right? He's a Nigerian, but really, really brilliant, advertising professional. He's worked in advertising extensively in one of the biggest ad agencies in Nigeria called Inside Publicis. And at the time he published that work was the only definitive material that actually talks about how to sell to Africans. I've never read a material like that in my whole career. And so when I read that, then I think it was during the pandemic, he put out a course on how to develop strategy for African markets, which I attended. And I think that was pretty much the major unlock in my career. And from there, got into Dentsu, worked on some very interesting brands, like Netflix, like a couple of Diageo brands too, especially the mainstream spirit portfolio. From there, I transitioned into another independent agency that is called IMS as a strategy director. And then after that, a publicist, agency in Nigeria came calling called Inside Publicist, which actually is the largest advertising agency in Nigeria, right? And to become the head of strategy, right? And after that, I also got another opportunity to come to Kenya, and I'm like, okay, to join WPP. First as a strategy director, but now I'm head of strategy, data, and insights on the media side. So I think let me say that's a summary of how my career path has
You
been.
swapped from creative to creative strategies and now media strategies, right?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah.
That's fantastic, my friend. And you've mentioned the culture. Now you're in Kenya prior to Nigeria, and you mentioned something about the culture as well. And I have a question for you. But first, because mainly the main audience that we have are from Brazil, just for people to know about your hat as well. What's the meaning of
Oh,
the hat, the cap? I apologize because I don't know the name that you call it. Just by
okay, good.
curiosity.
Okay, okay, okay. So, what would you like to know? Are you talking about the culture in Nigeria versus like culture in Kenya, or I'm just
Could
trying to
could be
get
that
to
as
know.
well, but of the hat that you're wearing, you know?
Okay, the hat that I'm wearing. Okay, so let me
Yeah.
just speak specifically to that, right? Okay, so I'm from a tribe in Nigeria that is called Yoruba, and the Yorubas they are from the southwestern part of Nigeria, right? Very large, tribe. But it's not only in Nigeria that you have the Yorubas, right? You also have the Yorubas even in your country, Brazil, right? I'm very sure if you remember this this Michael Jackson video that was shot in Brazil with a certain kind of people called Olodum. I don't know if you remember.
Hold
They don't really care about us. Yeah. So there's also a lot of a lot of presence of Yoruba culture in Brazil, especially when it comes to the Orishas. Like there are pretty much kind of like similarities. So even in Cuba and a couple of the Caribbean countries, there's presence of Yoruba and all that, right? And so the cap I'm wearing is called fila, right? And fila is actually a fashion accessory, but it's made from a local material, that is called ashofi. But pretty much is that it's an accessory that is part of like everyday lives, right? And it also has some kind of cultural significance, right? You can with fila you can actually signify your marital status. That's one funny thing about it. So if you wear it to the left, like I did now, or like you're saying now, it shows that you're married, right?
on.
If you wear it to the right, it shows you're single. And if you wear it straight up, right, it shows that you are not interested in talking to anybody. So a Yoruba man can actually get into a party, and just by how he has worn his cap, everybody is going to know whether he's single, he's married, or he's interested in talking to people. So yeah, there are other cultural significance. Sometimes there are some kind of caps that are used to signify the kind of profession that such person do in the society. So the hunters, they have their own kind of cap, the chiefs, the people who probably they are highly placed in the society, they have their own kind of cap. So there is also another dimension to that, how fila is being used to signify social status, occupation, and some other things. But I think the really interesting part is how it can signify your marital status. Yeah.
That's very interesting. I don't know if I would use it. But
No,
yeah,
you should.
which
I
side?
can actually make one and send to you.
Which
You know,
side? No, I'm
like
still married.
a lot of people in Kenya usually sort of like ask me, oh, they are interested. I need to make some for them. It's a
Very
full
interesting.
fashion.
And talking about the culture, we've talked a little bit as well about the global campaigns. So
Yeah,
when there are
yeah,
global campaigns, how do they adapt for the African countries? But usually they just think about Africa as a whole. They don't think about the difference of cultures between one country or other. That's what you've mentioned before, right? They just made one
yeah,
for this
yeah.
is for Africa, the adaptation for Africa.
Mm. Yes, yes, you're actually correct, right? And I think it's one problem that I've seen consistently in the course of my career. Working in global agencies. Now I've worked in about 4 global agencies, then two Leo Burnett Publicis. I'm currently in WPP, right?
Yeah.
Now, the thing that I've seen when it comes to global brands that want to run campaign in Africa is that first, there is always that assumption that Africa is a single market, right? And I could understand. For example, I could probably do an ad to say I want to launch this ad in the APAC region, or I want to launch this ad in the EMEA region, right? But you see, that doesn't pretty much work for Africa, right? Because when it comes to Africa, aside from the fact that there are distinct languages that define how people relate, there are also cultural contexts that really differentiates the expectations of people, or that really, that really sort of like differentiates the people and makes their way of life completely different. Now let's talk about my country, Nigeria, right? Nigeria has 3 major tribes called Hausa, Yoruba, and Igbos, right? But aside from these 3 major tribes, Nigeria has over 250 ethnic, minor tribes, or let me say ethnic groups, right? Over 250 ethnic groups, right? Now, if you want to sort of like communicate in Nigeria, like you can't just come and say that, oh, because Nigeria is one country, then I can speak to everybody they will understand. Now, sometimes that quite kind of like works. But you see, these 3 major tribes, in the region where you can find these tribes, the way of life is totally different. From the food, the clothes, the festivals, the values, the customs, how we approach things like marriage, and stuff like that. They are all totally different, right?
Yeah.
And as a result of this, also, because of this geographical reality, right, you also need to kind of like, approach each of these geographical realities based on the context of the culture. So, for example, the Hausas, or let me say the Northerners, they are the northern part of the country. Now, and there is a very strong intersection of religion, of the Islamic religion, and the culture in the north, right? So when you are talking to them in the north, you have to be aware of the religious implications of whatever you are doing, right? Because there is a very strong intersection of Islam, right? And and the culture. In fact, the northern part of the country has the highest population of Muslims, right? So you are all so and that is a different reality in Southwest. In Southwest, it's almost like 50-50 when it comes to the balance of Christians and Muslims. When you go to the Southeast where you have the Igbos, they are predominantly Christians. So can you see, these
Yeah.
contexts and,
Yeah.
and how brands can't just come and say that, oh, I want to talk to Africa. I mean, you can't even talk to Nigeria as one. I mean, depending on the region or what you are trying to do, right? So back to my premise about how global brands come and they just want one campaign to launch in Africa and all that. Now, a whole lot of times, what we get are assets that has been developed globally. And they will tell you that we have developed this asset globally, so we just want you to, cascade it to your market. Now, from my experience, right, most of this cascading, most of these campaigns that are being cascaded to local markets that are developed, on the global level without taking into consideration the nuances of culture, the nuances of, lifestyle and all that, those campaigns usually flop. But you see, yeah, those campaigns, they usually flop. Yeah, because people cannot see themselves in the campaign. They cannot, yeah, they probably also sort of like, you see that, okay, the brand is trying to say something, right? But because the brand is not, the campaign is not taking into cognizance the reality of their culture, the reality of their lived experience, they tend to disconnect. And I've had several examples, in the course of my career of campaigns that flopped like this. But for the global brands that are getting it right in Africa currently, what you see that they are doing is that instead of developing assets globally and cascading in African markets, what they do is that they adapt. So what I've seen as a workable solution is that the global brand has a global theme, or a global, let me say, a global brand philosophy, right? Let us take open happiness for Coca-Cola as an example. Open happiness is Coca-Cola's global brand philosophy,
Yeah.
right? So Coca-Cola don't just say that, okay, because I have open happiness, now I'm developing an asset globally, then I'm just cascading it in Africa. No. They come to the African market. It could be Kenya, it could be Nigeria, right? And they said, okay, our global philosophy is open happiness. So how can we adapt this global theme into the reality of this particular African country? So the framework, right, is we take the global brand philosophy and we look for cultural opportunities, right, within the market to express that global brand philosophy so that the people in that market, they are able to relate with the global brand philosophy because it has been communicated in the language of their culture. I sent you a case study on Guinness made of more, right? And that's also Guinness made of more is also a very brilliant example of how global brands can actually, successfully communicate in African markets. So made of more is the global platform, is a global brand platform, right? They did some sport for the European market. I shared that with you where you have some friends, playing basketball in a wheelchair and all that stuff, right? But when they were coming to Africa, they went to a country called the Congo Brazzaville, and they found a group of people called the Sappors, right? And the Sappors are people they are like the fashionistas. They are very forward looking when it comes to fashion, right? They are always well dressed, gentlemen, gentlemanly kind of kind of dressing, right? They have the straps, they have the what do you call it? They have the three-piece suits, but that is not actually what is interesting about these people. What is interesting about most of them is that most of them during the day they do menial jobs. They are people that work in market as load carriers. They are probably on some construction sites, packing rubbles. So they do dirty work. Like they are people that when you meet them in the day, you would actually think there is nothing special about them, right? Because of the kind of work that they do. But what is so amazing about them is that when they close from work, from that dirty work, and they get back home, they shower, and they change into their best, into their fashion, into their fashionable ways. Then they gather somewhere in the evening and all that. Now, for someone who has met those kind of people during the day, you won't believe that they are the same kind of people you are meeting in the evening, who are so fashionably dressed, looking gentlemanly and all that. Now, that is the made of more definition, right? So Guinness didn't just say, you know what, this TVC we've shot for Europe just cascaded to Africa. I mean, they're going to get it. No, they found a cultural opportunity, in the African market, which is the support to tell the made of more story. So that is what I saw that has been a very effective framework, in the African market in terms of how global brands translate their brand philosophies, not by cascading, but by adapting into the culture of the specific African market.
That's very interesting. And could remember the study, it's from 2022. I don't have an updated one that we had when I was working at Meta, the lack of representation around the globe that people with black skin was seeing on the ads when there was a black person in the ad. So it felt like a checklist. Oh, is there one? Yes, okay, done. Without
Yeah.
without representation. That felt
Yeah.
like that. 83%, I believe, was feeling that lack of representation. And on that, I would love to learn from you as well about the positive impact that brands can make. I believe that what you've mentioned is already something about the positive impact on society and planet and of course on profit. But how to think about that without forgetting the people and planet, about society and environmental positive impacts, and the focus on profitability, of course, and the brand
Yeah.
construction.
Okay. I think that's a very interesting question. So when it comes to positive impact in Africa, I think it's slightly different also from what global brands will try to do in some of these global north countries. I'm talking of the West, right?
Okay.
Uh, I think it was an Edelman report. I think it was one of the Edelman reports. I think 2023 Edelman report. So Edelman published this report that is called Trust Barometer. And the beautiful thing is that they have started doing a lot of these reports with focus on African markets. And there was one of those reports, I think they went for 2023, where they were talking about how, trust has really declined, when it comes to African government, especially with so many people in African countries, right? But what is really interesting about that report is that they were seeing an uptick in how people are trusting brands, right? So people are losing trust in government institutions, right? They are also losing trust in media because at some point in Africa, right, the media becomes some kind of they become, kind of like complicit, with governments, in some way. So at some point, people got to know that we can't trust the media any longer, right? But they started seeing an uptick in how people are trusting brands, right? And what that establishes that in Africa, there is a lot of expectations that people have from brands. And that expectation is actually coming from the fact that the government and some other institutions in Africa, they have left a very huge vacuum, right? In terms of providing infrastructure, in terms of providing amenities, and stuff like that. And so that is really the big opportunity, for brands in terms of driving positive impact. So positive impact for brands in Africa, it's pretty much around how do we fill the gap that the government has left, right? And so you see a lot of impact initiatives in Africa built around uplifting and built around uplifting and restoring hope, right? To the Africans, right? So, for example, one of the fascinating things that I've sort of like found since I got into Kenya was actually how some brands in Kenya are actually, building education infrastructure, right? To like the kind of investment they are making, you'll be so surprised. So take, for example, the largest telco, in Kenya that is called Safaricom. Safaricom has a foundation where they actually give out scholarships, right? They give out scholarships to
Oh,
brilliant and talented African student, right? And some of these scholarships, revolves around things like, for those that probably they're going to high school, for those that are going to university, and all that, right? And they build this platform because it's because of the large, vacuum. It's because of the vacuum that the government has left. There's also another interesting bank, so called Equity Bank. Equity Bank has a platform that they call Wings to Fly. And this is pretty much like a community-based outreach where they also empower, talented and brilliant young people in the community, right? So you will see that most of the positive impact is actually trying to fill the gap that is left by the failure of governance, right? So you also see interventions when it comes to health, when it comes to healthcare. You see interventions when it comes to things like a talent discovery. There's also a telco in Nigeria that is called MTN, right? That at some point they created a platform that is called Project Fame, right? And Project Fame actually is actually one of the platforms that help to discover, a lot of the music talents, right? So, and stuff like that. You also have some alcoholic beverage brands also in Nigeria. There's an alcoholic beverage brand. There's a beer brand in Nigeria that is called Star. If in fact Star was a major contributor to like grooming talents and creating platforms, for Nigerians to showcase their their music ability, right? In terms of sponsoring events, in terms of creating competitions and all that. And so when people talk about Afrobeats, right, in Nigeria currently, for example, now, what they also don't realize is that there was a lot of brand investments, right, that sparked the Afrobeat movement in the early 2000s. And without this brand investment, it would have been very difficult for us to have the Afrobeat that we have today. That is a part of the story that so many people don't talk about, right? In fact, also brands like Pepsi, invested heavily in terms of discovering talents, and even signing some of these stars as brand ambassador. A global Afrobeat star like Wizkid, right? When he started out and he wasn't so much known, right? He was one of the ambassadors that Pepsi signed. So when these guys were just coming up, right? Government wasn't the one that was there for them. It was the brands in Nigeria that was there for them,
That's
right?
fantastic. The brands coming
Yeah,
first.
yeah. Yeah, it was the brands that created the platform, for them to showcase their talents, right? At some point, I think it was an artist. It was one of the early artists that broke out called Two Face, right? He got a contract that was so huge that got him traveling across Nigeria and performing. Nobody has ever done that before then, right? So when we talk about positive impact in Africa, it is actually from a space of brands trying to fill the gap, right, of failure of governance, right? And the contribution is what you can see. I've talked about, what brands are doing in Kenya with education. I've talked about what brands did by investing in early Afrobeat stars that has now made the movement to be so, so big. And if you also look at other African countries, from South Africa, to Tanzania, Ivory Coast and all that, you will see similar trend, of brands trying to bring that positive impact, but it's really about uplifting people, giving people opportunities, to break through, to shine, and to be successful at what they are good at.
That's fantastic because the truth of the brands and truth of the acts that the brands are doing, not only the divulgation of it without with not only about the purpose of the brand, but about the truth, the true things. I have interviewed a couple that have written a book about that. Which one is your truth? To ask the brands about it, so
Yeah,
you can have
yeah.
the proof of positive impact, not only a cause that you are working for, but having the facts that you are doing to be connected with your purpose, not only say that you have the purpose. And it was very interesting. André Cassu, the last one that I have published, mentioned about a bank in Brazil, Bradesco, a huge bank over here, that for 70 years are doing already the investment and on the education. They are giving space for education around the country for different children over here. And that's fantastic. But as I've listened to you now, you have more on your continent that are happening than I believe from Brazil. I don't have the numbers for it, but I believe so, just listening to you. And talking about the numbers, you've mentioned your career that you have changed from creative to creative strategies and now media strategies, and in Africa you are changing from media to creative depending on the project, on the task. But which one are the main difference between creative and media strategies on your point of view? Which one are the main difference between both?
Okay, the main difference, creative strategy is the strategy that pretty much tells you. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
All right, okay. So creative strategy is actually that strategy that holds, or that takes care of what we need to say, right? What we need to say, what is going to be the message. And I mean, from your experience, we have what we call a single-minded proposition. That is usually the output of creative strategy, right? So creative strategy uh, within the advertising process is that part of strategy that tells us uh, what we need to say, essentially. And it all comes from if you've done your four C's with the consumer, the culture, the category, the company, and you see what the whole thing is looking like. You've looked at trends and you've mapped the trends to see, okay, what is the mindset and what is the mind space of the consumers? What is that thing that we can tell them about this brand or about this campaign that is going to land? So creative strategy takes care of the what of the message, right? Media, on the other hand, it's actually the part of that pretty much talks about where. So we have the what of the message. So where are we going to say the message? Where should we put this message, right? Should we put this key visual on a transit billboard, right? That is in a high traffic, that is in a high traffic area, or should we put this in the digital media in a mall, right? During a weekend where there are a lot of people that are shopping. So media strategy simply answers where. But another thing that I've also seen as a gap that I'm trying to work with my team to bridge is actually the part of media strategy that can actually also look at the when. So increasingly, we are beginning to see that where you talk about or where you showcase your advertising is not just the most important thing, right? When you showcase your advertising, is also really, really critical. So there was this report that that WPP Media Global um, released, I think, around Q4 last year, and it's titled "How Humans Decide." It's a free report. I think you should look for it, and it's actually a very, very interesting report. And the report was actually built from it was built from I think around 1.2 million consumer purchase journeys, right? But really interesting thing is that there are three concepts that actually are game changing for anybody in media currently based on that report. So three concepts came from that report. The first concept is what they call brand priming, right? Brand priming. And what they saw from mapping the 1.2 million consumer purchase journey is that brand priming actually is that subtle, powerful influence that shapes consumer decision. So long before people think that they're going to buy something, there are certain cues that shapes that decision. So the cues could be about the moment, the cues could be about, it could be about the exposure, it could be about the need state, right? And another interesting thing from that report is that most brands, most brands position themselves for when people want to buy. But there is a big opportunity before that purchase moment that brands are not optimizing for. And that is what is so groundbreaking about that report. And so based on brand priming, we are also beginning to reshape how we think about media strategy. That it's not just about where we need to put the message, right? The brand priming part is also critical. Another concept is audience receptivity. And this is actually a concept that is speaking to the fact that consumers' openness to marketing and the likelihood of them being influenced by it actually varies across product categories. So you can actually say that, okay, I want to put my message on this billboard on a high traffic transit area and all that. But by the time your audience are going through that region, they might not be receptive to the message.
Yeah.
Right. So again, that is also a very, groundbreaking concept, that came out from that report, audience receptivity. So again, it's not just about where you are putting your message, right? It's also to think, will the audience be receptive, right, to this message, right? In terms of their need state, in terms of the environment, and stuff like that. And that is why you say TV still becomes, the one of the most powerful, media channel you can use. And the reason why TV has become repeatedly, I mean, there are a lot of reports that have said, oh, TV is going to die, but TV keeps coming back and it keeps evolving, right? And I think the reason for that is because of the audience receptivity. Because TV actually is in an environment where people are not distracted.
They are focused, very focused on especially
You're
football
very
matches,
focused, right?
like me.
Exactly. You are very focused when you are watching your TV. So, and I think that is one of the things, the audience receptivity. So that TV delivers is also one of, one of the reasons why, TV still remains, one of the most powerful media channel to use, right? And you see, the third concept, from that report is what they call touch point influence, right? And you see, when we talk about touch points, we usually see touch points, just as a channel where a brand can show up, right? So e-commerce can be a touch point, right? Retail, can be a touch point and all that. But you see, the touch point influence, also comes to one of the most groundbreaking, media philosophy that we usually quote, that says the medium is the message, right?
Message.
So
The video is the
yeah,
message.
yeah, exactly. So touch point is the medium, right? So how you kind of like uh bring the message for platform fitness on your touch points is also very, very important,
Yeah.
right? So for example, now if you look at the digital space, there are a lot of short contents, short formats, short content formats that have been coming out. I think this was started by TikTok, right? So Instagram deployed Reels, YouTube also introduced Shorts, right? And all that, right? But again, the thing also really about content format is also the fact that the format of your content, it also has to make sense for the touch points that you want to deploy it, right? So when we look at this three concept of brand priming, when we looked at touch point influence and audience receptivity, you start seeing that media strategy has evolved, from just talking about where should we put the message, but also talking about the moments, the environment where the environment around, the medium where the message is going to be displayed, the receptivity of the audience, and even also how the brand has primed the audience before the message comes through. So back to the question, right? That is what I see as a fundamental difference, right? Creative strategy takes care of the what, media strategy takes care of, the where, right?
Is
But
cons
again,
planning in the middle of that? Cons planning, is it the middle in middle of that? Or what?
yes, exactly. Fantastic. So comms planning, actually, we can say comms planning is the bridge, right? Between creative strategy and media strategy. And which unfortunately is also like, I mean, comms planning is going out of fashion, in so many agencies. Comms planning, I mean, some people call it connections planning, right? But personally for me, it is one of the ancient art of planning that I'm trying to bring back in my department, right? Because like you rightly said, that is the bridge between what we are trying to say with the creative and where we want to put our message. So comms planning finds creative ways to say, okay, this what of the message, right? How do we contextually expose the message in a way that actually enhances the visibility and the resonance of the message? Because at the end of the day, you can have a very high reach with your campaign, right? But if
Yeah.
your campaign is not resonating, you are not going to deliver impact, right? So you can get all the reach, that you want to get, and people keep seeing the ad in terms of frequency, but if the message is not resonating with them, then the impact and the objective you want to achieve is still not going to be possible. So, like you
What's the
rightly said,
task? Sorry if you interrupted, but what's the task of the cons planning? Could you say the framework of the task specifically on the cons planning? Like I should write just one thing about the connection, or should I say that this is the key message and which are the mediums that we should use? What's the specific task of the cons planning?
I think the specific task of a comms planner is to identify um, cultural opportunities or
Okay.
cultural movements that will amplify the resonance of the message.
Perfect.
So for example, there was a very beautiful campaign by Absolute Vodka. Just hold on for me a moment. Um, I think it was yeah, I think it was Love Responsibly, right? Yeah, I think it was Love Responsibly, and I think that campaign is actually a very beautiful campaign that we can use as an example of what a comms planner do, right? So they have these statistics that most what do you call it, most intimate partner violence happens during Valentine's, right? When lovers day, when people gather together and stuff. So a lot of intimate partner violence, happens during that time. And so, but again, imagine Absolute Vodka, which is an alcoholic beverage brand, wants to talk about that, right?
Yeah.
And so, and what? So the message is love responsibly. Now they could have decided to roll out that message on any other day, right? But a comms planner came in and said, okay, if you are trying to talk about or address intimate partner violence, right? Why don't we talk about roll out that campaign on the day that is actually meant for lovers, which is Valentine's Day? And the reason for that is because a cultural opportunity was identified with Valentine's Day, right? So the Valentine's Day has already created, a momentum. It has already primed the minds of your audience to be receptive to such message. So even if you launch that campaign on any other day aside from Valentine's Day, I mean, it's not like you won't get whatever you're trying to get, but the kind of impacts that such campaign will have on the Valentine's Day is going to be way higher than launching it on any other day. So, or think of a bank that has a product for women. Let's say a bank has a product for women entrepreneurs. Now, imagine that campaign launching on International Women's Day. You see?
Yeah.
So, I strongly believe that the role of a comms planner is to identify cultural opportunities and cultural moments that can amplify the resonance of a campaign. So it's not just so a media planner will tell you we need to put this on 5 TV stations, 10 out of home, 10 out of home billboards and stuff like that. We need to put this on 20 radio stations and all that, right? But a comms planner does not think channels, right? A comms planner thinks culture, it thinks moments. When can we launch this campaign and it's going to give us the biggest impact? So comms planner naturally they are very culture centric in their thinking, right? Because they understand how culture moves people when people do certain things on certain days and how those cultural opportunities can actually help brands to elevate their message, right?
Friend, it's fantastic to listen to you. And I'm very happy that I have your contact now because I would like to stay 10 hours over here, but learning more from you. It's fantastic to listen to you, Tosin.
I mean, if this were to be physical, I mean, I won't mind 10 hours. You just need to get me some Brazilian cocktail and, we just, we just,
I'll tell you more about the culture of Brazil. I'll tell you more about football because I'm addicted for that.
oh, fantastic. I actually used to be a very huge fan of football, but I don't know what happened along the way, to be honest.
Uh, no problem.
But I mean, I still follow it anywhere I can. But I mean, again, I wouldn't expect less. Brazil is very huge. It's a very huge football country. So
I hope we can
I
get a
mean,
sixth title.
you said what?
I hope we can get a sixth title now on the World
Yeah,
Cup.
yeah, yeah. I hope so too. I have personally given up that my country will ever get it.
Fantastic, Tosi. Thanks a lot for participating over here.
You're
I
welcome.
will publish this on the next week that is coming.
All
And
right.
thanks a lot, my friend. Love it
No,
to
you're
talk to
welcome.
you.
You're welcome. You're welcome, Rafa. And thanks for having me. I mean, it's really a very huge it's really a very fantastic experience, sharing, these things about advertising, about marketing, about culture and all that. It's really, really it's really, really interesting. So thanks so much for giving me the platform. And of course, like you said, we will definitely be in touch.
Fantastic. And for you that are listening or watching, if you liked, just give us a like over here on YouTube.
Yes,
Uh,
yes. Give a
Share with your
like,
friends
subscribe.
and
It's
subscribe.
it's
Oh,
it's
just that.
strategy revival. It's strategy revival, right?
Yeah, Strategist Revival. That's it.
Strategist revival. Yeah. So like, subscribe to Strategist Revival.
Thanks a lot for everybody. Thank you,
All
Tosin.
right. Yeah. Bye.
Bye.